The Tuesday night shift at St. Gabriel Military Medical Center had its own weather. Fluorescent rain poured from the ceiling monitors, chimed in uneven rhythms, and the air smelled like disinfectant old coffee and the metallic hint of blood that never really left. Riley Shaw moved through it as if she had been born here. Gray scrubbed sneakers that made no sound, hair knotted tight against the back of her head. She slipped around gurneys and IV poles, one hand already reaching for the right tubing before the resident finished asking for it. To most people, she was easy to miss. Just another trauma nurse in a crowded level 1 emergency department outside San Antonio. To the charge nurse, she was reliable. To the interns, a lifesaver who happened to know where everything was. To Dr. Nathan Cole, the attending who ran the trauma bays, she was Shaw and good hands, and do not get creative. The helicopter passed overhead at 2240. Its rotors thudded through the roof and into the bones of the building. The sound did something strange to the air inside Trauma 2. Riley's hand paused over the clamp she was reaching for just long enough for the metal instrument to click against the tray instead of landing in her palm. She inhaled once slow. The scent of chlorhexidine sweat singed hair. Her fingers flexed. On her left wrist, just below the elastic of her glove, a thin white line of scar tissue stood out for a heartbeat, as if remembering something only it knew. Then she picked up the clamp and passed it to the resident without comment. "Shaw Bay 3 is yours when you clear here," Cole called from behind the sterile drapes. He did not look up from the torn-open leg in front of him. Drunk driver into a light pole, contusions, maybe a broken rib. Stabilize, admit nothing fancy. Nothing fancy. There it was again. The boundary line. "Got it," Riley said. Her voice was smooth neutral, the kind that did not invite extra conversation. By 23:10, the usual chaos had settled into a tired rhythm. A toddler with a fever in room 7, a retired sergeant with chest pain being ruled out for a heart attack, a young woman with a sprained ankle studying her phone more than her discharge papers. The televisions in the waiting room played muted news segments about a storm somewhere else. The overhead speaker cracked in at 23:17, slicing through the room's background noise with a different tone. Mass casualty incoming. Convoy attack 30 minutes out. Multiple critical. Penetrating trauma, possible internal injuries. All trauma staff to stand by. Everything in the emergency department sharpened. Voices rose and fell faster. A tech began rolling open fresh packs of gauze and towels. Someone killed the TV sound. The door to the ambulance bay hissed open and closed as people rushed equipment outside. Riley felt it in her chest first, a small tightening behind her sternum. The word convoy did that to her. She checked the monitors and Trauma 4 confirmed her current patient was stable, then stepped out into the main corridor where Cole was already scanning the whiteboard. He stood with his arms folded, a pen between his fingers, reading the incoming report as it updated on the screen. His dark hair was damp with sweat at the temples. Under the bright lights, he looked carved from something that did not bend easily. "All right," he said more to the room than any one person. "Bay 1 is blast trauma, Bay 2 gets abdominal, Bay 3 chest, Bay 4 is the driver lowest priority." His eyes landed on Riley for the first time that hour. "Shaw, you are Bay 4, Shaw," he said. "Driver side injuries, paramedics, stable in the field. Keep him on the monitor vitals every 10. Do not improvise." There was no insult in his tone, just hierarchy. Riley nodded once. "Bay 4. Sirens arrived before the patients did a rising wail that bounced off the concrete outside and slipped under the doors. The ambulance bay filled with red and blue flashes. Cold air and exhaust pushed into the hallway in short gusts each time the sliding doors opened. The first gurney crashed through with a shout of, "Blast injury, both legs hypotensive." That one went straight to Bay 1. The second had a soldier clutching his abdomen, pale and sweating shrapnel glinting near the dressing. Bay 2 swallowed him. Bay 3 took a ranger whose chest was wrapped in blood-soaked bandages that someone had tied in a hurry. Bay 4 rolled in quieter. The medic guiding the gurney was breathing hard but not panicked. On the bed lay a young man in torn fatigues, blonde hair, matted with dust, left arm strapped to his body in a makeshift sling. Red abrasions marched in a diagonal line across his ribs beneath a shredded t-shirt. "Name is Corporal Luke Harper, 22. The medic rattled off, passing Riley a clipboard. "Driver of the second Humvee, left shoulder fracture, rib contusions, multiple lacerations from the door. No reported loss of consciousness, vitals stable the whole ride." Harper looked younger than his age. There was something unfinished about his face, as if the world had not had time to teach him how to hide what he felt. His eyes were two bright pupils still wide from adrenaline and pain. "That door hit me like it had a grudge," he said through a tight grin as Riley slid a blood pressure cuff around his arm. "Could have been worse, right?" "Let's keep you in the could have been category," Riley said. The cuff hissed as it inflated. "BP 118/76, Heart rate 94, respirations 18, O2 saturation 97 on room air, the medic finished. Riley moved quickly almost without thought. Saline lock in his right hand, blood drawn into neatly labeled tubes, gown cut away from his chest. She ran gloved fingers along his clavicle, tracing the angry lines of the seatbelt, bruised the swelling over the shoulder. "Tell me if something hurts more than a 7, she said, eyes on his skin, not his face. "It's all about a welcome to the NFL 9, Harper said. "Except the shoulder. That one is a 10 with a vengeance." She found the deformity at the joint already secured in a field splint. It would need imaging and probably surgery, but it was not killing him in this moment. She pressed gently along his ribs. He grunted at the worst tender spots but did not flinch in the way that made her nervous. Behind her, someone yelled for O-negative blood. Somewhere else, a monitor alarmed in the high-pitched tone that turned everyone toward it. Riley finished her primary survey and stepped into his line of sight. "Any trouble breathing?" she asked. "No, ma'am. Just feels like I lost a fight with my own truck." She rested her palm flat against his upper abdomen, just below the band of abrasions. The belly was soft under her hand. No distension, no rigid defense. She moved lower, pressing in slow, deliberate increments, listening less to his words and more to the way his muscles tightened or did not. When her fingers sank into the right upper quadrant just beneath the edge of his ribcage, something in his face changed. Not pain, not exactly. His breath caught as if something inside him had shifted out of place without permission. Riley lifted her hand, waited a beat, then pressed again a few millimeters over. Harper's eyes flicked to the ceiling and back. "That feels weird," he said quietly. "Like there's a goldfish in there, or a loose battery." She glanced at the monitor. Heart rate 98 now. Blood pressure still pretty. O2 steady. The numbers said fine. Her skin said something else. She repeated the pressure in the same spot, slower this time, watching his pupils, his throat, the way his fingers curled against the sheet. Weird. Floating. Her mind tagged the words and filed them with the image of the impact, the direction of force, the path internal organs might have taken when a door crushed against his side. "All right," she said, stepping back. "Stay with me, Harper." She stripped off her gloves in one smooth motion and crossed the hall toward Bay 1, where Cole was finishing a field dressing on a mangled leg. "Dr. Cole," she called just loud enough to carry over the noise. "I want a fast exam on Bay 4. He did not turn at first. He's your lowest priority. If the medics say he's stable, he is stable. We have open fractures and a chest full of shrapnel in here." Riley did not raise her voice. She tightened it. "Driver's side door intrusion. Lateral force rib abrasions, subtle guarding. He has a silent belly and a strange sensation in his right upper quadrant. This is a mechanism for splenic injury. If we wait, his blood pressure will drop after he looks good on your paperwork." The resident next to Cole glanced over at her. Cole paused for half a second, hands still. He finally looked up. There was something different in his gaze now, a recalculation. He wiped his forearm across his forehead, leaving a faint smear of someone else's blood there. "If the scan is negative," he said, "you and I are spending some quality time with the protocol manual." "Yes, doctor," Riley said. She was already moving toward the ultrasound cart before he finished the sentence. 2 minutes later, the gel was cold against Harper's skin. The room dimmed a fraction as the monitor glowed to life. The tech held the probe against his abdomen, eyes on the grainy gray and black shapes appearing on the screen. Riley watched the image with a familiarity she did not advertise. The curve of the liver, the shadow of the spleen, the spaces that should have been empty waiting. A dark crescent appeared near the spleen, hugging where it should not. An ink spill in the wrong corner of a page. "There," she said softly. The tech swallowed. "Positive free fluid in the left upper quadrant. That is blood." Cole stepped in on the last word. His jaw tightened when he saw the image. He did not argue, did not pretend it might be something else. "Page surgery, won't he?" said. "Get him booked. We are not waiting for him to crash." They began to move again. IV fluids hung higher. A consent form appeared under Harper's hand, his signature a shaky scrawl. Gordon from transport arrived with a stretcher, and together they slid Harper onto it, monitors beeping in disjointed chorus. As they pushed him toward the elevators, Harper craned his neck to see Riley. "So," he said, voice thinner now, "not just a fight with the truck, huh?" "Your truck cheated," she said. "We are going to fix what it did." His fingers brushed the side rails, searching for something solid. Riley let her own rest near his for a moment without quite touching. The elevator doors opened and swallowed him, Cole, and the surgical team. The numbers above the door blinked upward. The sound of the rotors outside had gone. The emergency department hummed on. Riley stood for a heartbeat in the quiet that followed, feeling the echo of that dark crescent on the screen more than she had felt any of the alarms. On her way back toward the trauma bays, she cut through the waiting room. One of the televisions was still on volume low, stuck on a military news channel that the day shift had forgotten to change. Grainy footage filled the screen, a canvas tent under floodlights, cots crammed together, bodies on tables. A woman in bloody scrubs moved between them, hands deep in a chest wound, hair pulled back severely from a too young face. The caption across the bottom read, MAJ Cassandra Ward Combat Surgeon, Sanguinfub. Riley paused just long enough for the camera to catch the angle of that woman's jaw, the set of her shoulders, the way her hands never stopped moving, even as explosions trembled the oxygen tanks behind her. The fluorescent light above flickered once. Riley reached for the remote on the table and clicked the television off. The screen went black, reflecting only her own face and the ghost of another woman superimposed on it. She set the remote down and turned back toward the trauma bays, the smell of antiseptic rushing up to meet her. The night at St. Gabriel was nowhere near over. By the time Harper disappeared behind the operating room doors, the adrenaline spike of the convoy arrival had flattened into a low buzzing line. The smell of burned metal and dust clung to the hall. Someone mopped up a thin trail of dried blood that had crusted into the grout between tiles. Riley moved through it with a chart in her hand and something else ticking in the back of her mind. The picture on the television would not leave. The young woman in the canvas tent, arms elbow deep in someone's chest, explosions shaking the metal ribs of the structure while her hands never stopped. She signed off on a medication order at the nurse station, fielded a question from a new intern about where to find extra suture kits, and checked on the toddler in room 7, now snoring against his mother's chest. Everything looked like a normal bad night. Harper's name blinked on the board tagged as OR 3. Riley's gaze stayed on it a fraction too long. Upstairs, the observer's gallery above the operating rooms was lit with a softer, honey-colored glow. Recessed lights set back in the ceiling. It was meant for families and medical students, people who wanted to watch from behind glass and not smell the cautery smoke. Nurses did not usually come here unless they had a reason. Riley slipped through the door with a visitor badge clipped to her scrub pocket. No one stopped her. The bench along the glass was empty. Below, behind the thick pane, Cole stood gowned and gloved at the table, where Harper lay opened from just below the sternum. The bright circle of the surgical lamp washed color from everything except the blood. Machines hummed. A scrub nurse passed instruments into Cole's hand without needing to be asked. He worked clean. Textbook. Careful dissection-controlled suction. He exposed the spleen, found the tearing in the capsule, started the process of controlling the bleed. On the monitor, Harper's blood pressure drifted in tiny increments. 118 dropped to 116. 116 eased to 114. Not a crash. Just a subtle downward slide like a tide pulling back from the shore. Riley watched the numbers as much as she watched Cole's hands. He adjusted a retractor, positioned a clamp, then paused to get a better look. His eyes were on the visible injury, the splenic tear, the obvious culprit. The pressure dipped again, 112 now. The pattern pulled at a familiar thread inside her. The same shallow step down she had seen on monitors powered by generators, with sand underneath the wheels of the beds and mortars falling somewhere too close. Slow bleeds that turned to sudden disaster when someone believed the numbers would stay kind. Her fingers curled against the edge of the bench. Her nails dug into the wood until her knuckles ached. Below, Cole finally frowned at the monitor, backtracked, shifted his clamp a few millimeters. The next reading steadied. 114, 115, the heart rate eased. Riley let out a breath she had not admitted she was holding. Across the glass, no one looked up to see her. The gallery, like always, made ghosts. She stayed long enough to see Cole complete the repair and close, then stood and slipped silently back into the fluorescent world of the trauma floor. St. Gabriel's administrative offices were 2 stories above the emergency department, behind a set of smoked glass doors that smelled of toner and stale coffee instead of antiseptic and iodine. The carpeting there was thick enough to muffle footsteps. Linda Patel, hospital administrator for 17 years, sat alone under a pool of desk lamp light glasses low on her nose. Her office was lined with framed commendations and black and white photographs of the facility before the last renovation. On the desk in front of her sat a personnel file that had not been there the week before. Riley Shaw. Linda had read thousands of these files. They had a rhythm like any other kind of record. Undergrad nursing school or medical school residencies fellowship if there was one. A list of hospitals. A list of references. Too much information, sometimes whole paragraphs about volunteer work or hobbies that left their fingerprints all over a life. This one was sparse. Bachelor of Science in Nursing from a small state university, passed boards on first attempt, clinical experience listed as Military Medical System Support 2022 to 2023, no unit named, no facility. References all tied to Department of Defense email addresses, verified but short. Each one said essentially the same thing. Competent professional cleared. And then the gap. 18 months of nothing before the start date at St. Gabriel. No previous civilian employment. No listed address history beyond a post office box. No emergency contact. Linda tapped her pen against the empty space on the page. She had seen that kind of hole before in files that came with quiet calls from federal offices. Sometimes it meant classified work with scars attached. Sometimes it meant trouble. Often it meant both. She drew a small question mark beside the gap and closed the folder. For the moment, the problem could sit. The night already had more than enough moving parts. Downstairs, another ambulance pulled away its lights off now. When Riley walked into Bay 6, Captain Daniel Rios was propped halfway up on the bed, one side of his face, a map of fresh stitches and purple swelling. The good side still managed a crooked smile. "Hey, Shaw," Jordan said, glancing up from the chart. "Our VIP wants more ice and less dignity." "I asked for neither," Rios said. His voice was rough from pain meds, but not dull. He smelled faintly of smoke and antiseptic ointment. "But I will not turn down ice." Riley took the glove from her pocket, snapped it on, and peeled back the loosely taped gauze at the edge of his cheek. Dried blood tugged at the hair on his jaw. His left eye was almost swollen shut. The right watched her closely. "Color is good," she murmured. "No new bleeding. You planning on auditioning for a pirate movie, Captain, or is this a one-night look?" "Just keeping it interesting," he said, then squinted. "Where did you say we met?" "I did not," Riley said. "We just met tonight." "That is funny," Rios replied, "because I swear I have seen that scar before." She froze for a pulse of a second, then continued gently cleaning the dried blood as if nothing had been said. On her left wrist, the elastic of the glove pulled back an inch. The thin white line there, diagonal across the skin, showed just enough for a trained eye. Rios' gaze dropped to it, then back to her face. The room shifted for him, the fluorescent light, the hum of the vent, the faint drip of saline through a nearby line. None of it mattered as much as this. "I served in Helmand," he said carefully. "Sangin District, field hospital that should not have stayed standing as long as it did. We had a surgeon there, Major Ward, Cassandra Ward. People called her something I'm not supposed to say in front of administrators." Riley taped down the last edge of the dressing. "Lot of wards in the Army," she said lightly. "Lot of scars, too. Maybe." His words slowed. In the photos, she had that exact line on her wrist. Got it holding pressure on a femoral artery while a guy tried to kick off the table. Riley stepped back. "I will put in for your ice," she said. "Try to keep the pirate routine to one side." She left before he could say her name in any context that mattered. When the door clicked shut behind her, Rios reached clumsily for his phone. His thumb moved with more certainty than the rest of his body. He pulled up an old folder he did not open often. Pictures from 8 years ago filled the screen. Sand, tents, men with guns slung over their shoulders, grinning without humor. The inside of a green canvas hospital lit by harsh bulbs, faces pale on stretcher cots. He found the one he wanted. In the photo, a woman in stained scrubs stood at the center of cramped chaos. Her hands sunk into the chest of a soldier. Another patient behind her, another to her right. The world around her looked blurred, as if the camera lens had not known what to focus on and chose the only thing that did not move. The name tape on her chest read Ward. On her left wrist, the faint line of a fresh, stitched wound crossed her skin. Rios zoomed in until the pixels broke apart. Then he scrolled to the hospital directory on a different app, found the staff listing for St. Gabriel. Trauma nurse Riley Shaw. The headshot was clinical, taken against a gray backdrop, but the bone structure did not change, and neither did the way her eyes met the camera, as if it was another piece of equipment to manage. He pressed call on an old number flagged only as TL. 3 floors down, the overhead lights hummed. Private Ely Park had been placed in a curtained corner of Bay 2, hooked up to nothing more invasive than a pulse oximeter. His chest rose and fell too fast. His eyes were halfway between here and somewhere else. Jordan waved Riley over, nodding toward him. "Our psych consult is backed up. He is hyperventilating and does not like my jokes. You are up." Riley pulled the curtain half closed enough for privacy, not enough to make it a box. Eli's hands twisted in the thin blanket. Specialist Park, she read from the chart. 23. Panic symptoms triggered during training exercise. No chest pain, no cardiac history. His gaze flicked to her in a way as if making eye contact might pull him into deeper water. "Where were you?" she asked, dragging a stool beside the bed. Her tone was mild enough that it could have referred to anything. "Huh. When it started happening for real the first time," Riley said. "Not in training. In the field." His throat worked. He stared at the metal railing. "Sangin," he said quietly. "Checkpoint on a market road." We were laughing about something stupid, and then the building across from us just came apart. Dust and concrete. Sound went out. Then there was nothing but screaming. He focused on a spot on her shoulder somewhere near the seam of her scrub top. "My spotter was right next to me," Eli whispered. "One second he was there. Next second he was on the ground and I was holding what was left. And I could not stop it. I could not even hear myself. They said I got lucky." Riley watched the pulse oximeter numbers. 96, 97. His breathing was still shallow, but it had slowed by a fraction. "You survived," she said. "A lot of that sounds like anything but luck. Surviving feels wrong when someone next to you does not." He blinked, muscles jumping in his jaw. "You talk like you have been there." She adjusted the nasal cannula by a millimeter more to give her hands something to do than because it needed fixing. "I have seen that look," she said. "The one where the room is here, but part of you is still on that road. The thing that tried to kill you did not finish the job. Which means it has to live with that. You do not." His eyes met hers for the first time, and something eased in his shoulders. Not fixed, not cured, just a notch toward the surface. "Breathe with me," she said, in on 4, out on 6. She did it with him until his hands loosened on the blanket. When she stepped back into the hallway, Jordan was leaning against a cart, arms crossed. "You know, Jordan said most nurses just hand him a paper bag and call psych." Riley shrugged, tiredness settling under her skin. He did not need a bag. He needed someone to say sanguine without flinching. Jordan studied her face for a long moment. "You have been different tonight," she said. "Head elsewhere. Eyes on the exit a little too much." "I am fine," Riley replied. "Sure," Jordan said softly. "And I am Queen of Texas." She stepped closer, dropping her voice. "You have been here 18 months and you never talk about before. Now you are jumping in front of Cole reading belly injuries like you wrote the book, calming down kids with combat flashbacks like you have their script. I have seen that look too, you know. The one people get when they have already packed in their head." Riley glanced toward the back corridor that led to the staff lockers. She had in a moment between patients straightened her shelf, pulled her spare socks together, folded her extra scrub top tighter than usual. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. Jordan raised an eyebrow. "If you say so." In the quiet that followed, the overhead intercom crackled again, feedback hissing before the voice settled. "Trauma staff be advised. Federal agents en route to facility. Estimated arrival 0500. Administration requests key personnel remain on site." Jordan looked up at the speaker, then back at Riley. "Sounds like we are getting company," she said. Riley's hand drifted toward her wrist thumb, pressing unconsciously over the old scar. By 0455, the emergency department had the hollow, fragile quiet that came just before the day shift arrived and shattered it again. The fluorescent lights still hummed, monitors still blinked, but conversations had thinned out into low voices and the rustle of paperwork. Outside, the sky over San Antonio was a flat, bruised gray. 2 black SUVs rolled through the security gate of St. Gabriel, the headlights cutting a straight line across the empty visitor lot. Their tires hissed on damp asphalt. The guard at the booth checked a clipboard, then waved them through with a stiff arm. On the second floor, Linda Patel watched them for a moment through the narrow window beside her office door. She saw the flash of government plates. She saw 2 figures step out, straighten jackets, adjust the fall of suit coats over holstered weapons. She closed the blind and picked up the phone. In the trauma bay, Riley rinsed dry blood off a pair of scissors at the sink, letting the water run longer than they needed. The intercom had gone quiet since the last call about federal agents, but the words still hung in the air. "Shaw." The charge nurse's voice came from the doorway. "Admin wants you upstairs." "Patel's office." Riley turned off the tap. "Now, that is what 'wants you upstairs' usually means." She dried the scissors, set them in the tray, and stripped off her gloves. Her fingers left faint wet prints on the stainless steel. On her way out, she checked Harper's name on the board. His status had shifted from OR to PACU, stable. She let the word settle in her chest like something heavy that did not hurt. The elevator ride to the administrative floor always felt longer than it was. The doors opened on carpet in silence. The air was cooler here, drier flavored more with copier toner than with antiseptic. Linda met her in the hallway, expression arranged into something deliberately neutral. "Riley," she said, "thank you for coming up. There are some people who need to speak with you." She gestured toward her office. The door stood half open. Inside, a woman in a charcoal suit sat in the guest chair opposite the desk. Legs crossed at the ankle, tablet resting on one knee. She looked to be in her early 40s, dark hair pulled back, eyes an unexpectedly pale gray that missed very little. Beside her stood a younger man in a navy suit, shoulders tight, hands folded in front of him. His tie was straight, his posture straighter. "Ms. Shaw," the woman said. Her voice carried the even cadence of someone used to people listening. I am Special Agent Maya Ruiz. This is Special Agent Ethan Cho. We are with the Federal Bureau of Investigation assigned to the Counterintelligence Division. She flashed a badge, quick and precise. Riley stepped inside. Linda closed the door behind them and moved to her own chair, the one behind the desk, as if seeking some familiar anchor in the room. Have I done something wrong? Riley asked. The question sounded small in the office. Ruiz studied her face directly. That is what we are here to clarify. She touched the screen of her tablet. A photograph filled it, and she turned the device so it faced Riley and Linda both. The image was official, standard military portrait. A woman in army dress uniform, dark hair, pulled back tight, eyes focused somewhere just over the camera. The background was a mottled gray-blue. The name strip on the uniform read Ward. Underneath, in small print, the caption said, M.J. Cassandra, Ward, M.D. Army Medical Course. Riley felt the air recede a little as if the walls had taken one step backward. Major Cassandra Ward Ruiz said quietly, Special Operations Combat Surgeon. Deployed multiple times, most recently attached to a forward operating base in Sangin District, Helmand Province. She tapped the bottom of the screen. A line of text appeared overlaid in military font. Killed in action March 14, 2016. Officially, Ruiz continued. She died 8 years ago. Ethan spoke for the first time. Except your face is in that picture, Ms. Shaw. Down to the scar pattern on your left wrist. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and laid it on the desk. Inside plastic sleeves held printouts, one of the same portrait from the tablet, one of the hospital ID photo for Riley Shaw. Lines of code and numbers trailed underneath each, the readout of some facial recognition software. System flagged you during a routine sweep on federal medical facilities, Ethan said. Match high enough that we were asked to take a closer look. Riley sat down slowly in the remaining chair. The cushion hissed softly under her weight. Your fingerprints from your nursing application, Ruiz said, match the biometric record for Major Ward. Your height is the same. Your blood type is the same. The gap in your employment history lines up with the period in which Major Ward was listed as deceased. Linda's fingers tightened on the pen she was holding. Riley, she asked carefully, is this true? Riley looked at the photograph. The uniform felt foreign and familiar all at once. The younger version of her had a sharper jawline, fewer lines around the eyes, but the set of the mouth was the same. No one asked me for my story when I filled out the HR form, she said. Just the parts they needed to pay me. Consider this us asking. Now, Ruiz replied. The office settled into a tense quiet. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly. My name, Riley said at last, is Cassandra Ward. People called me Cass. I was a major in the Army Medical Corps. I worked mostly with special operations units. She swallowed. Her mouth tasted like dust and old coffee. They told the world I died in Sangin, she added. They were wrong. I just did not correct them. Ruiz sat back slightly, but there was no satisfaction in it. Only a shifting of angle. Start with Sangin, she said. Start with the day you were supposed to have died. The room dissolved around Riley for a moment, the beige carpet and framed certificates bleaching out at the edges. The light changed. It went from soft office glow to the harsh white of halogen bulbs powered by a diesel generator. She could smell it again. Canvas walls held up by metal poles. The air inside thick with heat sweat, the coppery weight of fresh blood, the whine of a suction canister, the steady, high-pitched beep of monitors too small for the work they were asked to do. The field hospital in Sangin had not been meant for the volume it was taking. Cass stood at the center of the main tent, palms wet through latex, operating on a 19-year-old with a hole in his chest the size of her fist. To her left, another surgeon worked on a man whose leg had been turned into something unrecognizable by an explosive. Behind her, a nurse called out vital signs for a third patient whose abdomen was opened from hip to hip. Heat crawled under Cass's collar. Her scrubs were glued to her spine. Outside the distant thump of artillery was a separate rhythm that she had long ago learned to ignore until it got closer. Clamp, she said. The instrument slapped into her hand. She found the bleeder, cut off the flow, moved to the next problem. The heart on the table shuddered, then steadied. A radio crackled in the corner voice, distorted by distance. Someone shouted, incoming, incoming, and then someone else shouted, all medical personnel heads up. She did not look away from the wound. The door flap burst open. Cold air knifed in carrying dust and the smell of exhaust. 4 MPs pushed a stretcher inside weapons slung faces set. On the stretcher lay a man with a tangled beard and gray in his hair, his black tunic soaked dark red at the abdomen. Makeshift dressings had been slapped over the wound, but blood had seeped through in thick patches. "This is Naziri," one of the MPs said between breaths. "Fareed Naziri, high-value target. He goes on the table now." Cass flicked her eyes toward him for a heartbeat. "Everyone on these tables is high value," she said. "That is how this works." The radio in the corner hissed and a new voice cut through, clear and direct. "Surgeon Ward, this is command," the voice said. "You are to stabilize the detainee. Priority 1. Repeat, the detainee is priority 1. Intel package attached. We need him talking." She kept her hands moving on her current patient, tying off a suture. "I have 2 coalition casualties open and 1 crashing," she said, not sure if her words reached the radio. "You want to choose who bleeds while I save your asset. Say it clearly." "Silence, then." "Then, Ward, you are ordered to keep that man alive. That is your directive. We will divert the others if needed." She looked up finally and saw Naziri's eyes. They were dark and alert, despite the blood loss fixed on her face, with something she did not have time to read. The 19-year-old's heart tone steadied. She handed off the case to the surgeon beside her, with a clipped exchange of instructions. The soldier behind her took a breath that did not rattle. "Put him here," she said, clearing a space as someone wiped down the table in a rush. "Hang 2 units. Cross-match what you can." When she opened Naziri's abdomen, the smell of torn bowel flooded the air, pungent even over the antiseptic. His insides were a wreck. Shrapnel had chewed through loops of intestine-nicked vessels, left a mess that would have been easier to walk away from. Her hands did not walk away. They did what they had been trained to do. Across the tent, someone shouted for more blood. Someone else called a time of death. Cass worked through it, closing holes, cutting out non-viable tissue, patching what she could. She felt the weight of the radio orders like a hand on the back of her neck. She knew exactly who Naziri was. She knew what he had orchestrated in nearby valleys, what roads he had laced with explosives. She knew the stories of burned-out vehicles and children in the wrong place at the wrong time. Still, every time his blood pressure sagged, she corrected it. The first mortar struck near the outer perimeter before she finished. The sound hit like a dropped world, followed by a shudder through the ground that made the IV poles rattle. Dust sifted down from the seams in the tent ceiling. Someone yelled for everyone to get low. Cass bent over the incision. "Keep him on the table," she snapped when a nurse flinched. "You move him and he is dead in seconds. You stay and he might actually have to live with what he has done." The second mortar landed closer. The blast wave punched through the canvas, knocked 2 racks of supplies to the floor. One of the fluorescent bulbs exploded, showering glass over a nearby cot. A third hit to the rear corner of the compound, rippled through the stakes holding the tent. Part of the wall sagged. Cass did not remember exactly at what point she realized they were targeting the hospital itself. The facts came later in reports. At the time, there was only the widening of a crack in the earth under her feet and the knowledge that the men on either side of her table had not finished their cases either. She clamped another vessel inside. Naziri closed the last layer as fast as she safely could and shouted for him to be moved just as a 4th impact howled across the camp. Afterward, there were bodies. 14 patients never left that tent alive. 8 members of the medical staff did not stand up again when the barrage stopped. Someone in a uniform she did not recognize told her she was a hero for staying at the table. It did not feel like heroism. It felt like choosing which ghost would follow her off that patch of dirt. The memory receded. The beige office came back into focus. Ruiz watched her with the steady, unblinking attention of someone cataloging more than the words being spoken. The official after-action report, Ruiz said, notes your actions as extraordinary under fire. It also notes your status as missing presumed dead when the tent partially collapsed. By the time they pieced together who had survived and who had not, you were gone. "I was alive," Riley said. "Barely. They offered me a medal large enough to hide behind in a rotation back home, and I could not make those things make sense in my head. So I signed what they put in front of me, let the paperwork call it what they wanted, and walked out of the system when no one watched closely." Ethan shifted, discomfort flickering across his face. "You understand that from a legal standpoint, you have been working under a false identity in a federal facility," he said. "Licensure, payroll, all of it built on an incomplete truth." "Is that why you are here?" Riley asked. "To arrest me for filling out the wrong box." "No," Ruiz said. She closed the tablet and folded her hands over it. "We are here because Fareed Naziri escaped custody 6 months ago, and because since then, soldiers from your unit men who were present at Sangan and in the operation that brought him in have been dying." She opened a different file and slid a sheet of paper across the desk. It was a list of names. Next to each, a brief notation. SGT Daniel Cross, Vehicular accident, Colorado. CPT, James Mitchell. Overdose ruled suicide, Texas. CPL, Stephen Reeves. Fall from scaffolding, Seattle. On their own, Ruiz said, these look like tragedies, unrelated. Taken together with certain intercepted communications, they start to look like something else. Targeted cleanup, Ethan added. Removing everyone connected to a specific mission. Riley read the names once, then again. She could see faces attached to two of them. The third made her stomach turn because she did not have a face, only the knowledge that she should. There are two more missing, Ruiz continued. Sergeant David Morrison and Private Joshua Chen, both last seen in civilian settings in Afghanistan. Both off the grid for 7 weeks. Both presumed dead, though we do not have bodies. She let the weight of that settle. We have reason to believe Naziri is behind these deaths, Ruiz said. We also have reason to believe he knows exactly who kept him alive in that tent. In certain circles, he speaks about you by name. Or by nickname. Riley's throat tightened. What nickname? Ruiz hesitated for a breath. The Angel of Sangin, she said. And he does not mean it kindly. Outside the office window, dawn was bleeding into the sky, pale light edging past the blinds. So yes, Ruiz said. We care that you have been using the name Riley Shaw. We care more that the man you kept breathing on orders has a list, and your name is on it. 2 days ago, one of his known associates was seen gathering information on medical facilities that treat military personnel in this region. You think he is coming here? Linda said quietly. We think this hospital is on his board, Ruiz answered. We think hiding a dead surgeon in your trauma bay was a decision someone made without considering who might come looking. Riley sat very still. Her hands lay flat on her thighs. The scar on her wrist was a stark white stroke against skin flushed with sudden heat. What do you want from me? She asked. We want your cooperation, Ruiz said. You know details of that mission and of Naziri's injuries that do not exist in any file. That matters. We also want you alive, which means we need to remove you from here. Witness Protection's safe house controlled environment. We have transport arranged. We can move as soon as you sign off on a temporary leave and hand over your badge. Riley imagined packing up her locker again. She imagined Harper waking up from anesthesia Eli Park, reaching for air, the trauma team, facing whatever rolled through the door next, without someone who could read Sand Country injuries on sight. I left once, she said slowly. I let everyone think I was dead and I disappeared. It did not stop anything. It did not make Naziri vanish. It just made me a shadow in a different building. This is not about guilt, Ethan said. It is about staying one step ahead of someone who kills without hesitation. In my experience, Riley replied, men like that do not stop because someone goes into hiding. They just look for softer targets. Ruiz studied her expression unreadable. Before any of them could say more, the building itself interrupted. The overhead speakers crackled feedback, spiking for a second. Then the voice of the security system cut in, flattened by the intercom. Attention all staff, it announced. Security alert. Unauthorized attempt at entry reported at East Wing service access. Lockdown protocol is active. All non-essential personnel remain in secure areas. Medical personnel maintain positions and await further instruction. A soft click followed as the doors in the hallway engaged their magnetic locks. Somewhere below in the emergency department, a nurse cursed under her breath. In Linda's office, no one moved for a moment. The fluorescent lights hummed on. The blinds rattled faintly as the air conditioning kicked in. Riley's eyes flicked to the ceiling, then back to Ruiz. You might be late, she said. The word lockdown had a different weight in a hospital. It did not ring like a fire alarm. It settled thick and cold into the space behind the ribs. Linda reached for the phone on her desk, then stopped when she saw that both Ruiz and Ethan had already lifted radios from inside their jackets. Security, Ruiz said into hers. This is Special Agent Ruiz. Confirm East Wing breach and lockdown status. Static crackled back for a second before a male voice answered. Confirmed. East Wing service access, registered unauthorized badge use. Doors sealed. Cameras show no one inside the vestibule at this time. Lockdown engaged facility-wide. Name, Ruiz said. Who am I speaking to? Marcus Doyle, head of security, the voice replied. You must be the agents they warned me about at 0500. Where is your control center, Mr. Doyle? Basement level, east corridor. Ruiz clipped the radio back to her belt and stood. We are going down there, she said. Dr. Patel, keep your staff where they are. Ms. Shaw, you are coming with us. Linda blinked. Should she be in the middle of this? Ruiz's eyes met Riley's. She already is. The elevator ride to the basement felt shorter than the one to administration, even with the same hum of cables and faint scent of cleaning supplies. When the doors opened, the air was cooler, touched with the metallic smell of electronics that had been running for years. The security control room sat behind a reinforced door with a keypad lock. Doyle opened it from the inside before they reached it. He was stocky hair, close-cropped, wearing a uniform that fit his frame like a habit. He had the look of a man who had spent enough time in uniformed service that switching branches had not shaken the stance out of his legs. "Agents," he said in greeting. His gaze flicked past them to Riley, taking in the scrubs, the ID badge, the tired set of her shoulders. "And a nurse." "This is Cassandra Ward," Ruiz said. "She has experience in environments where this kind of thing happens, whether we like that or not." Doyle's eyebrows rose a fraction. He did not ask what that meant. The room around him was lit by a grid of monitors showing different parts of the hospital. Hallways, stairwells, entrances, waiting rooms. Most of them now had a red icon in one corner that read "Lockdown." "What do we have?" Ruiz asked, stepping toward the screens. "Initial alert from East Wing Service Access," Doyle said, pointing at one feed. Door registered an attempted card swipe that did not match any active badge. System did what it's paid for and locked down. Cameras show no one in the vestibule, so either it was a glitch or someone tried to clone a card and got cute. "Any other anomalies?" Ethan asked. "We are still pulling logs," Doyle said. Lockdown is standard when the system thinks someone is poking at the doors from outside. Riley stood a little behind them, eyes moving over the wall of images. She saw the emergency department with its beds lined up and curtains half pulled for privacy. She saw the ICU where nurses moved between silent patients under soft lighting. She saw the main lobby empty except for a lone janitor standing at his cart, looking up at the locked front doors. "The East Wing access," she pointed. "Who uses that door usually?" "Supplies, laundry, patient transfers from smaller facilities if they come in non-emergent," Doyle said. "We use it to keep beds moving without clogging the main entrance." "Who has card clearance for that door?" Doyle frowned and typed a command into his console. A list appeared on the screen in front of him. "Environmental services, facilities, a handful of nurses and transport techs," he said. "Why?" "Because if you are trying to get into a place like this without coming through the front entrance, you do not choose a door nobody ever uses," Riley said. "You pick one people expect to see carts and gurneys going through. Less visible, more plausible." "You think he has a badge?" Ethan asked. "I think someone has a copy of one," she said, "either from a stolen wallet or a cloned scan. This was a test, a soft knock, see if anyone notices." She stepped closer to the bank of monitors, scanning the different camera angles. Her gaze paused on one that showed a side corridor in the East Wing. The lights there were dim set to night mode. The camera at the service access vestibule showed exactly what Doyle had said nothing. "Do you have external cameras on the service drive?" Ruiz asked. Doyle pulled up the feed. The outdoor view flickered onto one monitor. A narrow lane ran along the side of the building, bordered by a chain-link fence with barbed wire at the top. The gate at the far end was closed. No vehicles. "It could be a false alarm," Doyle said. Riley's hand closed around the back of an empty chair until her knuckles paled. "And it could be that the first attempt did what it was supposed to do," she said. "Find out how fast you lock down, how you respond where your eyes go." He looked at her, measuring. "You have done perimeter security before," he said. "Not as my main job," she answered. "But tents and cinder block outposts also have doors, Mr. Doyle, and people there also test them." A small chime sounded on one of the screens. A new alert window popped up in the corner. "East Wing stairwell door accessed," Doyle read. "Valid badge, timestamp 5:32, who Ruiz said. He clicked through. A badge photo appeared. A woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a weary smile wearing housekeeping scrubs. "Maria Alvarez," Doyle said. "Environmental Services night shift." "Pull the live feed for that stairwell," Riley said, already moving closer. On the monitor, the camera showed the interior of a concrete stairwell. The door was slowly closing from a recent opening. No one visible. No cart. No mop bucket. "There should be something there," Ethan said. Doyle swore under his breath. "If she used the badge, she should be in frame," he said, "unless the badge is moving without her." "Can you locate Alvarez on any other camera?" Ruiz asked. Doyle typed faster, pulling up a grid search for her badge ID. Nothing flashed across the feeds. "I will get eyes on her physically," he said, reaching for his radio. "Security 1, this is Doyle. Confirm location of Maria Alvarez. Last recorded badge, use East Wing stairwell lower landing." A beat of static. Then Control Security 1, copy, we will check. Riley's eyes were on the map overlay in the corner of the screen, the one that showed a basic floor plan of the hospital with colored dots, indicating doors and restricted zones. "Where does that stairwell come out?" she asked. "What is on that level?" "East stair goes from basement supply up to the 3rd floor," Doyle said. Floors 2 and 3 are mixed use, imaging some admin offices in the ICU. The 3 letters settled into the room. Show me the route from that stairwell to the ICU main entrance, Riley said. Doyle brought up another map traced with his cursor. If Naziri has a man inside with a cloned housekeeping badge, and if he came in that door, Riley said he will not head for the lobby. He will want leverage. Something that matters more than a locked gate. You think he goes for the ICU? Ethan said. I think if he cannot get to me easily, the next thing he goes for is my people, she answered. He knows this is a military hospital. He knows there are wounded soldiers here. Taking one nurse in a quiet hall is one thing. Walking into a ward full of people who cannot run is a different kind of message. Before they could respond, the overhead fluorescence flickered. The room went dark for a heartbeat, then came back under emergency power. The monitors stayed on, running on backup. The hum of the air conditioning cut out. A different fan kicked in a second later. A new alert flashed in red. Power loss sectors 2 and 3. Doyle read, backup generators active. That is not normal. They are not on the same grid as the external access system. Riley felt the small hairs on her arms lift. He is not testing the outside anymore, she said. He is already inside. Ruiz lifted her radio to her mouth. All units, this is Special Agent Ruiz, she said. Converge on ICU corridor. Approach with caution. Suspected hostile may be present with access to controlled areas. Do not engage without clear target. She looked at Riley. You do not go near that floor, she added. You stay here where the walls and the cameras are. I know the layout better than you do, Riley said. And I have a duty to keep you alive, Ruiz replied. Riley stepped closer, voice low and sharp. There are 20+ patients up there, including men who just rolled out of combat, she said. They are doped and intubated. They cannot protect themselves. You want me alive, fine. But I'm not sitting in a room full of screens while someone walks into their ward looking for a bargaining chip with my name on it. Doyle watched the exchange like a tennis match, jaw tight. Ruiz hesitated. The radio in her hand hissed again. Control, this is Security 3, a voice said. We have movement in the ICU hallway. Camera 23. Unknown male, mid-30s, Middle Eastern features jacket too big. He is at the nurse's station asking to see a patient transfer from Arlington. Says he is here for an orthopedic consult. There is no matching entry in the system. Put it on screen, Doyle said. The ICU feed filled one of the larger monitors. The main corridor was visible, lined with glass doors and soft lighting. At the central station, 2 nurses stood behind the counter. One of them was Sarah Miles' young freckles splashed across the bridge of her nose, brown hair twisted up under a cap. In front of them stood a man with sallow skin and dark hair, cut a little too short, like someone trying to look less like what people expected him to look like. His jacket hung in a way that suggested weight in the inner pocket. His hands rested on the edge of the counter. They did not fidget. His eyes flicked to the right and left, taking an exit sightlines distances. Zoom on him, Riley said. The camera tightened. The resolution was not perfect, but it was enough. Ruiz exhaled slowly. That is not a transfer patient. He is not our stairwell badge either, Doyle said. Look at his shoes. Wrong kind for housekeeping. Wrong kind for a long walk from a parking lot, too. Can your people get behind him? Ethan asked. They are 2 minutes out, Doyle said. Then stall him, Riley said. He expects to be challenged, but not by more than paperwork. Treat him like any other guy who does not know how medical systems work. Ruiz nodded into her radio. Security 3, this is Ruiz, she said. Instruct ICU staff to request ID and registration. Tell them to act annoyed, not afraid. You have backup en route. Do not escalate. On the screen, Sarah frowned at the man, tilted her head the way nurses did when patients tried to skip process. I am not seeing you in our system, she said. Her words muted but readable. If Arlington sent you, they would have called ahead. Sit for a minute and let me reach them all right. The man's jaw tightened. His hand slipped off the counter and disappeared into his jacket. He is moving, Doyle said. Before his fingers closed on whatever was inside, 2 uniformed guards appeared from the side hall, one on either flank. Their hands were empty but close to their holsters. Sir, one of them said, voice visible in the shape of his mouth. You need to step away from the nurse's station. The man froze. His gaze flicked to the left, to the right. Then he yanked his hand from his jacket in a quick, practiced motion. The gun never cleared fully. One guard took his arm high, the other drove into his midsection, forcing him back from Sarah. The weapon hit the floor, skidding under a rolling cart. Sarah flinched but did not scream. A monitor in one of the ICU rooms started chiming at the commotion. Subject is down, the guard's voice came over the radio. Weapon recovered. No discharge. Nurse Miles is unharmed. Hassan Marwali Ruiz said quietly. Eyes on the map that had appeared on her tablet. A photo of the same man in a different context, clipped to a report. Known associate of Naziri, he just tried to walk into an ICU with a gun. That is one, Doyle said. What about our stairwell ghost? As if on cue, another alert flashed at the bottom of the screen. ICU internal alarm, Doyle read. Panic button at bed 12. The feed from inside that room cut in. The camera mounted in the corner near the ceiling showed a narrow slice of the space, a bed, an IV pole, the outline of a ventilator. In front of the bed, partially blocking the view, stood a man with a knife pressed against the neck of someone in scrubs. Riley stepped closer until her breath fogged the glass of the monitor. The nurse was Sarah, again dragged backward through the doorway from the corridor, eyes wide, hands up. The man behind her was shorter than Marwali, lean, with a beard that had been trimmed roughly. His left shoulder sat lower than his right. His grip on the knife was solid, no tremor. Patients in nearby rooms were visible through their windows, some trying to sit up, others staring with unfocused eyes. Audio Ruiz snapped. Doyle routed it. The small speaker filled with yelling layered over the steady beep of monitors. Everybody back, the man shouted. His accent was clear-clipped. You come close, she dies. No units breach the ICU room, Ruiz said into her radio. Hold position outside the line of sight. Repeat, no one enters until I say so. Riley watched Sarah's throat, the pulse beating just above the blade. She saw the angle of the man's shoulders, the way his left arm held more tension than his right. He is guarding that shoulder, she said. Old injury. The way he is compensating, I would bet shrapnel. Maybe surgery that did not quite take. Ruiz glanced at her. How does that help? He is in pain, Riley said. Even if he does not show it, it is there. Pain is leverage. So is shame. She turned to Doyle. Can you get me a direct line to the ICU intercom? You are not negotiating with him, Ruiz said sharply. This is not a field trade. He is not listening to a cop voice over a loudspeaker, Riley replied. He did not come here for them. He came for me. You said he talks about me. Let him hear my voice and see if he remembers who held his side closed while he bled on a table. Doyle hesitated. The radio hissed again. In the ICU, a baby monitor alarmed somewhere shrill under the shouting. He is going to start cutting if nobody answers, Riley said. Let me talk to him. Ruiz weighed something in a very brief silence, then nodded once. You get 30 seconds, she said. We cut the line if he escalates. Doyle flipped a switch. A smaller microphone blinked red on the console. You are live into ICU corridor in room 12, he said. Riley leaned in close enough that her lips nearly touched the grill of the mic. Omar, she said, her voice low but clear. My name is Cassandra Ward. I know who you are. The noise on the feed stuttered. In the ICU room, Omar's head jerked slightly. Sarah's shoulders twitched under his grip. You know nothing, he spat, eyes searching the ceiling for the source of the sound. I know you walked into a ward full of people who cannot run from you, she said. I know your left shoulder has been wrong since 2012. I know you flinch when you reach too far and that you do not sleep well when the rain comes. He blinked once, so was in typing one slow. You were in Helmand when an IED took a piece of your team and a larger piece of you, she continued. They told you that you were lucky. You did not feel lucky. You felt like something was eating you from the inside. She shifted into Pashto, the words rolling easily out of a part of her mouth that had not been allowed to speak that language in years. I have seen that kind of wound, she said in his language. I have drained the infection of it. I have pulled metal from men who looked at me the way you are looking at that nurse. His eyes widened at the Pashto. His grip on the knife loosened a fraction, then tightened again. Let her go, she said, still in Pashto. You came for me, not for her. I am the one who kept Naziri on this earth when God and the dirt wanted him gone. If you need to do something for him, you do it with me, not with a girl who was just trying to pass meds. Sarah made a small sound, barely more than breath. Omar shifted his weight. The knife moved a centimeter away from her skin. You talk like you were there, he said, words halting in English now. Like you saw what you say. I was, she said, in Sangin, in a tent full of blood where men on both sides were dying. I know what it is to pretend you do not hurt when every step burns. Her tone softened just a notch. Your shoulder is infected, she said. The way you hold it, the way you protect it, it is not healed. You carry that pain because someone told you warriors are supposed to. They lied. Let her walk out of that room. Put the knife down. I will make sure someone looks at that arm properly. You do not have to let it rot, so your friends think you are brave. For a long moment, no one in the control room breathed. In the ICU, Omar's jaw worked. His eyes flicked from the camera to the door to Sarah's face to the monitors. His left hand shifted on the knife. His shoulder tremored a tiny spasm of fatigue. Then the emergency lights flickered again. The knife dipped. At that exact beat, a tactical officer outside the room took his cue. He moved fast low through the doorway, taking Omar's knife wrist in both hands and torquing it away from Sarah's neck. Another officer grabbed her around the waist and yanked her sideways. The blade slipped free, clattering to the tile. Omar went down hard, shoulder striking the edge of a cabinet. He yelled more in pain than fury. Subject restrained, the radio crackled. Nurse is clear, no major injury. Medic requested for laceration to neck and suspect's shoulder trauma. Riley's hand came off the microphone. Her pulse thudded hard in her ears. Ruiz exhaled. "Get Sarah to treatment and keep Omar under heavy guard," she said into her radio. "I want him breathing and talking for as long as federal custody allows." She turned to Riley. "You just offered medical care to a man who came here to help kill you," Ruiz said. Riley looked at the monitors. Sarah was being led out of the room by another nurse, hand pressed to the shallow cut at her neck. Omar was being cuffed, his left shoulder hanging at an awkward angle. "My hands do one thing," she said quietly. "They fix what is broken in front of them when they can. The rest is noise I have learned to live with." Doyle leaned back in his chair and rubbed his face with one hand. "Marwali in custody. Omar in custody," he said. "No casualties. Power on backup but stable. We just had a coordinated attempt at turning my hospital into a hostage theater and walked away with the hostages alive." He looked at Riley with something like grudging respect. "You really were out there," he said, "not just in the nice photographs." Riley did not answer. Her eyes were on the ICU feed where nurses moved from bed to bed, smoothing blankets, checking drips. In one room she could see Harper, pale but steady, oblivious under the haze of anesthesia and pain medication. She pressed her palm flat against the console, feeling the faint vibration of the building under her hand. The rotors that used to haunt her were quiet for the moment. The only sound was the layered hum of machines that were for now still working in her favor. By the time the last siren had wound down and the security radio stopped chattering every 5 seconds, the hospital felt wrong in its quiet. Not the usual pre-dawn lull. This was thinner, stretched like the air after a storm when branches were still on the road and people had not stepped outside yet to see what had moved. Back in the emergency department, the fluorescents hummed as if nothing had happened. A TV in the corner played a cooking show with the sound off. Someone had turned the volume down during the lockdown and never turned it back up. Riley stood at the sink again, scrubbing her hands, even though there was nothing on them that soap could change. The smell of disinfectant rose, sharp and clean. It did not quite reach the part of her that remembered cordite and dirt. "Shaw!" Jordan's voice came from behind her, softer than usual. "They are asking for you upstairs." Riley shut off the water. Who is they this time? "Patel," Jordan said. "And someone in uniform I have never seen before who walked in here like she owns the place." The elevator doors closed on the buzz of the trauma bay and opened on the muted hush of the 3rd floor. The ICU corridor was calmer than the last time Riley had seen it on a screen. The emergency lights had gone back to their usual unobtrusive glow. The only sign of the siege was a strip of fresh tape on the floor where the knife had landed. Sarah Miles sat on a stool near the nurse's station, a narrow bandage on her neck. Her hands trembled just enough to be visible when she lifted a cup of water. She looked up as Riley approached. "You all right?" Riley asked. Sarah let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "I am." "Here," she said. "Which seems to be the bar tonight." Riley nodded. "You did well," she said. "You kept your head." "I froze," Sarah said. "He grabbed me and I just stopped. I could not think." "You did think," Riley answered. "You hit the panic button. You kept your feet under you. You listened when the officers told you to move. That is more than nothing." Sarah swallowed. "Was that really you on the speaker?" she asked, speaking his language. Riley's gaze drifted down the hall. At the far end, near a small waiting area, she saw Linda Patel standing beside a woman in army dress uniform. "Yes," she said, "it was." Sarah followed her line of sight. "She has been asking about you," she said. "Looks like the kind of person who knows where all the bodies are buried." Riley did not answer. She walked toward the waiting area. The woman in uniform had steel in the line of her shoulders, gray in the dark hair pulled back at the nape of her neck, and a row of ribbons above her left breast that said she had been collecting reasons to be tired for 3 decades. Her face held both hard edges and something softer at the eyes. When she saw Riley, her mouth shifted into something that was almost a smile and almost a wince. "Miranda," she said, "you are taller than the last time I saw you." Riley stopped a few feet away. "That is not true, Colonel," she said. "I just finally stopped hunching at a field table." Linda looked between them. "Colonel Grace Harlow is with the Army Medical Command," she said. "She flew in as soon as she got the call." Harlow studied Riley's face openly. "I did not believe it," she said. "When they said you were alive, part of me thought it was a bad joke, or some cruel mistake in the databases. Then Ruiz sent me the footage from the control room." Her gaze flicked toward the ICU doors. "Most people do not negotiate in Pashto while triaging a hostage situation," she added. Riley's throat felt tight. She had imagined seeing Harlow again in too many ways over the years. None of them involved fluorescent lighting and a faint smell of coffee creamer. I did not expect a parade, Riley said, but I suppose this counts as something. Harlow's eyes softened. I came as soon as I could because you are one of ours, she said. Whatever else has happened. She glanced at Linda, then back at Riley. Can we talk somewhere that does not have a panic button on every wall? There was a small family room off the ICU corridor. It held 2 couches, a coffee table with old magazines, and a vending machine humming in the corner. Someone had left a half-empty cup of tea on the table. Harlow sat on one of the couches, cap in her lap, and waited until Riley sat opposite her. For the record, Harlow said the paperwork that declared you dead in Sangan was not my idea. I figured, Riley said, you were never that sloppy with signatures. We had incomplete bodies, incomplete reports, incoming rockets, and a command staff who wanted clean lines on their charts. Harlow continued. By the time anyone realized you had walked yourself out of that crater, the story had already taken on weight. They were handing your mother a folded flag. They were writing your name under sacrifice. She paused, thumb tracing the edge of her cap. The after-action reports, Harlow said, say you performed life-saving surgery on 42 people over the course of that attack. 6 of them would have been dead before sunrise if you had walked away when the first mortar hit. You stayed. You did not stop. That is what the file says. That is not what it felt like, Riley said. I know, Harlow replied. Because the file does not say what command learned later. It does not say that the barrage was not random. It does not say that Nasiri's people adjusted their fire once they confirmed which tent held the surgeon who kept bringing our operators back from impossible missions. Riley looked up sharply. You are saying they aimed at the hospital. I am saying, Harlow answered, that intelligence intercepted communications afterward. They talked about the woman with the bloody hands who made death look slow. They talked about the humiliation of their fighters crawling back to the same tent for the 3rd time and still waking up. They made you a target because you were too good at your job. Riley sat back, the cheap fabric of the couch rough under her palms. All this time, she said, I thought I stayed too long. That if I had cut one less suture, turned one less clamp, someone would have been able to drag casualties out before the canvas came down. Harlow shook her head once. We chose to put that many bodies in one tent, she said. We chose to make it the beacon. You chose to keep working when other people would have hit the floor and stayed there. The blast pattern was not your call. The choice of who walked out of that tent was not yours either, no matter how much your brain keeps trying to argue otherwise. The vending machine hummed louder for a moment. Somewhere in the distance, a monitor beeped and then settled. Why did you run? Harlow asked quietly. Not the logistics, the why. Riley looked at her own hands. They were steady now, the lines along the knuckles, the faint network of old nicks, the stark white of the scar at her wrist, all the same as they had been at 19 and 22 and 40. The things she had done with those hands did not fit neatly into anyone's story. They told me I was a hero, she said. They wrote citations about courage and sacrifice and the lives I saved. And all I could see were the faces of the ones I did not. I could not wear a medal for choosing to put my sutures in a man like Naziri, while a corporal from Tennessee bled out 3 tables over. So you walked into the civilian world and tried to be no one, Harlow said. I tried to be less, Riley corrected. Less responsibility, less weight. Just enough skill to pass along meds and patch up weekend warriors. I thought if I took myself out of the equation, fewer people would end up on the wrong side of my decisions. Harlow's eyes were steady on her. And now, she said, you are standing in a hospital that just became a target because Naziri cannot stand the fact that you reached into his chest and pulled him back. Riley gave a short, humorless exhale. Good plan, she said. Really worked out. Harlow leaned forward. You did not bring Naziri here, she said. He brought himself. He would have gone after someone anyway. Maybe another medic who followed orders. Maybe a junior officer who called the raid. You did not write his rage. You just intersected with it when you refused to let him die on that table. The door to the family room creaked open then, and Linda stepped in. Sorry, she said. I know I am intruding. There is someone else here who wants to see you. She held the door wider. Outside in the corridor, a small crowd had gathered near the nurses' station. Not a mob. No raised voices. Just a loose cluster of uniforms and hospital gowns and scrubs all facing the same direction. Captain Rios stood at the front in a set of borrowed sweatpants and a hospital robe. Bruises darkened one side of his face, stitches pulling a neat line along his jaw. He straightened as Riley stepped out of the family room. Major Ward, he said. Her first instinct was to correct him. The name felt heavy in the air. She did not. Rios brought his hand up slowly, body protesting the motion, and offered her as formal a salute as his injuries allowed. I owe you a proper one, he said. For Sangan, for tonight, for the fact that I am standing here instead of being a picture on someone's fridge. She shook her head. You owe me nothing. Wrong, he replied. A lot of us do. He stepped aside. Behind him, Harper leaned in a wheelchair, a blanket over his lap, eyes brighter than they had been in Bay 4. Eli Park stood with an oxygen cannula still in place, but no panic in his stare. Sarah Miles, with her bandaged neck, stood with a cup of coffee in one hand. Dr. Cole was there too, in wrinkled scrubs, looking like he had aged 10 years in 10 hours. His usual controlled expression was cracked at the edges. I was told I have to talk to you now, he said. Apparently there is a rule about not letting combat legends walk through your department for a year and a half without at least acknowledging that you have no idea who you are talking to. Riley almost smiled. I am not a legend, she said. You are a trauma surgeon who read a slow splenic bleed from a palpation when I would have sent that kid upstairs with a pat on the back, Cole said. You guided me through a cardiac shrapnel case like you had done it under worse lights. You walked into my hospital pretending to be a nurse so you could hide from the worst parts of yourself and still manage to be the best clinician in the room. He let out a breath. I have been calling you Shaw like you were just another pair of hands, he said. I am sorry for that, and I am grateful you were stubborn enough not to stay in the box I put you in. Around them, the small group stayed quiet. Blake from radiology still in his lead apron. 2 respiratory therapists. A young medic from upstairs who had watched the hostage feed from a hallway and could not quite process the fact that the calm voice on the speaker belonged to the woman in front of him. The applause started with Rios. It was not loud at first, a few claps awkwardly spaced. Then Harper joined one hand against the wheelchair arm. Jordan clapped eyes bright. Sarah. Eli. Cole finally. The sound grew, filling the corridor under the soft ICU lights. It bounced off painted walls and glass doors and the whiteboard where someone had written the date and the current attending. Riley did not know where to look. She found herself staring at the floor at the tired scuff marks on the linoleum, at the faint smear where someone had cleaned up Sarah's blood. Her chest felt tight in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Harlow stepped up beside her and touched her elbow. This, Harlow said quietly, just for her is the part the files never show. Not the medals, not the citations, the people who are still breathing because you refuse to lay your hands down. Riley blinked hard. Moisture blurred the edges of the hallway. She let it. She did not try to swallow it back into the same place she had hidden everything else. For the first time in years, when she looked at her own hands, she did not see only the ones she had failed to save. She saw Harper rolling past a threshold he almost never would have reached. She saw Eli letting air in without counting threats. She saw Sarah alive in a corridor that could easily have been a crime scene. The noise around her faded into a softer murmur. In the quiet between heartbeats, she realized that the ghosts she carried had not left. They stood a little farther back, though crowded now by the living. It did not erase anything. It did not rewrite Sengen or Naziri or the bodies under canvas. It made breathing feel possible. The applause thinned out slowly like rain easing off a roof. People drifted back to their posts, patients to their rooms, monitors to their quiet arguments with the night. Rios lowered his hand, wincing as the movement tugged at his stitches. He gave Riley one last nod, then let a tech wheel him away. Harper's chair squeaked as it turned toward the elevator. Eli tugged lightly at his nasal cannula and followed a respiratory therapist back to his bed. In a few minutes, the ICU corridor looked almost ordinary again. Just nurses chart soft shoes on hard floor. Riley stood there with Harlow and Linda after the others had gone. The air felt thinner, washed out by adrenaline and gratitude. Linda cleared her throat. There is one more thing, she said. Aside from the security reports and the fact that I apparently hired a dead major as a trauma nurse without knowing. Her attempt at humor did not quite land, but it loosened something in the room. Federal and military command are coordinating next steps, she went on. About Naziri, about your status, about what it means for you to keep working in my hospital. Her eyes moved between Riley and Harlow. I would like to say as administrator that this place is better with you in it than without, she added. However, that shakes out in the paperwork. Riley felt a tug in her chest at the quiet loyalty in the words. Harlow nodded. There are decisions to be made, she said to Riley. I would rather not make them under fluorescent lights with half the ICU listening. Do you have somewhere you go when you want 5 minutes without beeping? Riley thought of the chapel. It was small and plain, tucked near the center of the hospital, so that any family of any faith or none could find it without much effort. The carpet was worn in the aisle, the cushions on the pews thin from years of people sitting with too much on their shoulders. Colored glass in the narrow windows threw muted bands of blue and red onto the floor. Riley sat in a pew near the front. Harlow sat beside her cap, resting on her knees again. For a few minutes they did not speak. The silence felt different here, less like something left after the night, and more like something chosen. Command sees 2 options for you, Harlow said finally. 1, you come back on active duty. We fix your records. We pin the medals they tried to give your mother onto the right chest. We send you back into the world you know with an actual name on your uniform this time." Riley watched dust motes spin in a shaft of colored light. "And the other?" she asked. "You stay in the medical system, but not as a ghost," Harlow said. "We clear your identity, make it legal. You keep working in trauma either in a place like this or somewhere else under your real rank and with proper protections. There would be conditions. There always are." Both possibilities hung in the air like two doors each with its own draft. "You do not sound convinced by either," Harlow said. Riley let her hands rest on the back of the pew in front of her. Her fingers traced a shallow groove in the wood worn by other hands. "I cannot go back to operating like before," she said. "Not in that way. Not hopping between tents and concrete bunkers and hospitals that look like this one, but smell like diesel and fear. My hands remember how. My head does too. My stomach is not sure it can keep doing that math." "And staying here," Harlow prompted. "Staying here pretending I am just another nurse is off the table," Riley said. "We both know that. Staying as a surgeon in one facility is possible, but it feels small compared to the number of people who will keep stepping into what I stepped into, with no idea what to do when the wall of the tent moves." She turned her head toward Harlow. "Those kids upstairs are alive because someone taught me things I did not get in any textbook," she said. "Lessons written in other people's blood. If I'm going to keep carrying those stories, there has to be a way to put them to use without burning out on the front line again." Harlow watched her for a long moment. Then she reached into her jacket and pulled out a single folder thinner than most files Riley had seen. "There is a pilot program," Harlow said, "at Walter Reed. Advanced combat trauma training for surgical staff and medics, both military and civilian. They wanted someone who had seen too much and taken notes anyway. Your name was on the list before we even knew you were still breathing." She placed the folder on the pew between them. "Colonel rank," Harlow said. "Designing courses, running simulations, consulting on cases that need your eyes. No one forces you onto a helicopter without your consent. You would report to me. You would decide how much of yourself you put back into the field." Riley looked at the folder without opening it. The edges of the paper were crisp, untouched. In her mind, for a brief, vivid second, she saw a room full of young doctors and medics standing over mannequins that bled by design, learning where to put their hands when the world fell apart. She saw Rios among them, maybe trading his field kit for a stethoscope. She saw Harper dropping in as a volunteer, cracking jokes while they practiced triage. Her hands itched not with the need to cut, but with the need to rearrange the board so fewer people ended up on tables at all. "If I say yes," Riley asked, "what happens to St. Gabriel?" "St. Gabriel will find another attending." "Another nurse, another set of hands," Harlow said. "It will not find another Cassandra Ward. That is the point. We put you where the ripple effect is widest." Riley let out a slow breath. The colored light from the window crept a few inches along the floor as the sun outside climbed. "All right," she said. Harlow tilted her head. "All right," she repeated. "I will go," Riley said. "I will teach. I will write down what my hands know and make other people learn it until their fingers move before their fear. I will not disappear again." Harlow's shoulders loosened a fraction. "Good," she said. "I am tired of chasing your ghost." 6 months later, the air in the simulation lab at Walter Reed Medical Center smelled like plastic marker ink and the faint tang of artificial blood from the training kits. The walls were lined with monitors that could be turned into desert nights or city streets with a few keystrokes. Mannequins lay on gurneys in various states of pretend disaster. Colonel Cassandra Ward stood at the front of the room in duty uniform, her rank glinting softly under the overhead lights. Her hair was shorter now, easier to tie back under a helmet or cap. The scar on her wrist was the same. In combat medicine, she said, you never have as much time or blood as you want. You have what you have, and you have to decide where it goes without a committee meeting. 23 pairs of eyes watched her. Some belonged to young surgeons fresh out of residency, some to seasoned medics who had already seen more than they could name. In the front row sat Daniel Rios, no longer in patient garb, but in a resident's coat pen poised over a notebook. Today, Cass went on, we walk through blast injuries that look clean until they are not. You will recognize them in the field by the look the patient gives you when you press somewhere that should not hurt and their eyes skip a beat. She moved between the tables, showing where to put a hand, where to cut, where to stop. She pointed out patterns on the monitors, the same shallow dips and small lies that had given Harper's spleen away. The rotors outside when helicopters took off from the pad were faint through the walls, more background than threat. At the back of the room, Dr. Cole observed a visitor's badge clipped to his shirt. He watched her teach, then raised his hand during a pause. Colonel Ward, he said, a wry note in his voice. Have you ever considered writing all this down? When I am done making you write it first, she answered. After the session, the students filtered out in clusters, arguing over technique, miming clamp positions in the air. Rios lingered. "You look different," he said. "I have a better dry cleaner," she replied. He shook his head. "No, you look like someone who stopped trying to be invisible." She let that sit between them like a small gift. Later in her office, the computer on her desk blinked with a new secure message. Harlow's name sat at the top. The subject line was short. Earthquake Coastal Region Mass Casualties Limited Infrastructure. Request experienced trauma personnel for support mission. Cass read it once. Her heart rate did not jump the way it once had. It simply settled into a firmer beat. She thought of tents and cinder block wards, and people who would bleed whether she was there or not. She thought of the students downstairs, of the way their faces had lit up when the simulation clicked into sense. She typed her response. Volunteering for deployment, ward. At 05:45 the next morning, the sky over Maryland was a clear pale blue that had not yet decided what kind of day it wanted to be. The air on the tarmac was cold enough to sting the inside of her nose. The transport aircraft crouched on the runway like a gray animal at rest, ramp-lowered engines idling. Cass walked toward it in a flight suit duffel over one shoulder. The fabric rasped softly with each step. Her boots felt solid on the ground. As she climbed the ramp, the whine of the engines grew, filling the space around her. It was not the exact rhythm of the helicopters from Sangan, but it rhymed. The sound no longer dragged her backward, it pushed her forward. Inside the cargo bay smelled like jet fuel steel and the faint chemical tang of packaged medical supplies. A few other doctors and medics were already strapped in along the side benches, checking gear, murmuring to one another. Harlow stood near the front, one hand on a cargo strap to steady herself as the plane prepared to move. "Could not stay away from the flying hospitals forever," she said. "It seems not," Cass replied. Harlow's gaze flicked to Cass's hands, then back to her face. "You ready?" she asked. Cass looked past her through the small open hatch where the last slice of morning sky was visible. "I am going where I am supposed to be," she said. "That feels like enough." The ramp began to rise, cutting off the view of the runway, the hangars, the life she had built inside walls that did not shake. The world narrowed to the length of the cargo bay and the work that waited at the far end of the flight. Cass settled into a webbed seat, buckled the harness across her lap, and rested her hands on her knees. Her fingers flexed once, twice, as if testing their own memory. Outside, the engines roared louder. The plane shuddered, then rolled forward, gathering speed. The pressure pushed her gently back into the seat until the ground let go. The aircraft climbed the sky beyond the small round windows, shifting from pale to deeper blue. Somewhere behind that sky on maps, she could recite from memory, lay a place where buildings had fallen and people were waiting for hands like hers. She closed her eyes for a moment, not to shut anything out, but to feel the vibration of the flight run through her bones. The sound that had once meant nothing but danger now carried something else, something steadier. Not a ghost, not a legend, not a woman pretending to be less than she was. Cassandra Ward opened her eyes as the transport leveled off and the light through the windows brightened. She curled her fingers once more, then relaxed them. Whatever waited when the plane's wheels touched down, her hands would be there. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.